John Donne was born in London 1572 into the Catholic family of the successful and wealthy ironmonger John Donne during an intense anti-Catholic period in England. His mother, Elizabeth Heywood, came from the Sir Thomas More's family and was an accomplished literary woman, the author of the epigrams and interludes. Unfortunately, his father died in 1576 when he was only 4, leaving Elizabeth alone with the responsibility of bringing up the young children. After his father's demise, John's mother remarried to a surgeon, Dr. John Syminges. Later, she became the Dean of St. Paul's. Unfortunately, Elizabeth died in 1632. Young John was educated at home, like most of his class children at this time, until he moved to Hart Hall, now Hertford College, Oxford, in 1583. He proceeded to Cambridge for another 3 years there. He was not awarded a degree at either university due to his Catholic conviction. He would not take the oath of supremacy mandatory at the graduation. Donne enrolled as a member of the Tavis Inn 1591 and Lincoln's Inn 1592 to study law. After being imprisoned for offering refuge to a proscribed Catholic priest, Donne's brother Henry died in 1593 of a fever in prison. This caused Donne to start questioning his faith. His first collection of poems, Satires, is considered one of the Donne's most significant creative endeavors, published during this time of residency in London. Though not released directly, the volume had a relatively large readership via the private dissemination of the manuscript. The same was true of his love poem, Songs and Sonnets, assumed to be written around the same period as the Satires. Young Jack Donne, having inherited a vast wealth, lavished his money on womanizing, books, theater, and travels. Donne joined the naval expedition in 1596, which was commanded by Robert Devereux, 2nd Earl of Essex, against Cadiz, Spain. He also joined an expedition to the Azores in 1597, where he wrote The Calm. After he returned to England in 1598, Donne was appointed private secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, the Lord of Ellesmere afterwards. The post brought Donne into contact with many prominent and significant people in political, legal, literary, and church circles. During this time, a great deal of Donne's poetry was written, but he did not attempt to publish any of it. It was also during his service at Egerton's that he met and fell in love with Anne More, niece of Egerton's second wife and daughter of Sir George More, Chancellor of the Garter. Being fully aware that there was no chance of obtaining Sir George's blessings on their union, the two married secretly. For this offense, Sir George had Donne imprisoned along with his cohorts Samuel and Christopher Brooke, who had aided the couple's illicit affair. The union dashed the hopes of a public service career for Donne, and he found himself at age 30 with no work opportunity or enough funds to support his family. John Donne later summed up the experience, John Donne and Donne Undone. Anne's cousin offered the couple shelter in Pyford, Surrey. The couple were supported by friends including Lady Magdalene Herbert, Judge Herbert's mother, and Lucy, Countess of Bedford, women who also played a prominent role in John's literary life. Though Donne still had friends left, he found himself without a job. He repeatedly tried and failed to secure jobs, and his family was increasing in the meantime. Anne eventually bore 12 children, 5 of whom died before they reached maturity. It was not until 1609 that reconciliation between John and his father-in-law was effected and eventually forced Sir George More to provide the dowry of his daughter. In the intervening years, John practiced law, but they were lean years for the Donnes. John was employed by the religious pamphleteer Thomas Morton, later Bishop of Durham. To this period, before reconciliation with his in-laws, belonged John's Divine Poems 1607 and Beathanatus 1644, an original piece for its time, in which John argues that suicide is not a sin in itself. Friends had begun to encourage him to take holy orders in the Church of England as early as 1607, but he felt inadequate and continued to pursue secular work. In 1611 to 1612, he traveled with his newfound patron, Sir Robert Drury, through France and the Low Countries, leaving his wife at Meacham. As John Donne approached 40, he published two anti-Catholic polemics, Pseudo-Martyr 1610 and Ignatius's Conclave 1611. They were final public testimony of John's repudiation of the Catholic faith. Pseudo-Martyr, which held that English Catholics could pledge allegiance to King James I of England, who succeeded Queen Elizabeth I after her demise, without compromising their religious loyalty to the Pope. John wrote a funeral elegy in 1610 on the death of Sir Robert's 15-year-old daughter Elizabeth, in gratitude for patronage from Sir Robert Drury of Hausted. The anniversaries, An Anatomy of the World and the Progress of the Soul, continued the patronage. Sir Robert promoted the publication of the poems. The first anniversary was published in 1611 with the first elegy, and both were reissued in 1612 with the second anniversary. After their return from Europe, the Drurys provided Donne and his family with a house on Drury Estate in London, where they lived until 1621. Though James had an interest in Donne's work, he declined to reinstate him in court and encouraged him to take holy orders instead. The literary scholar finally acceded to the wishes of the king and was ordained deacon and priest on January 23, 1615. He was appointed reader in divinity at Lincoln's Inn in 1616. Cambridge had bestowed upon him 2 years earlier the degree of Doctor of Divinity. Donne's sermon, full of elaborate metaphors and religious symbolism, drama flair, wide-ranging learning, and his quick wit, soon established him as one of the greatest preachers of the era. However, this career turnabout was followed by sharing personal tragedy. In 1617, 2 years after John's ordination, Anne Donne died at age 33 while giving birth to a stillborn child. Grief-stricken at the loss of his emotional anchor, Donne vowed never to marry again, even though at the time he was faced with the burden of raising his children in modest financial conditions. Instead, his bereavement entirely stirred him to his devotion as a divine Anglican. John Donne continued to write poetry, notably his Holy Sonnets 1618, but the time for love songs was over. In 1618, John went to the German princes as a chaplain in his embassy with Viscount Doncaster. His hymn to Christ at the author's last going into Germany, written before the journey, is laden with fear of death. In 1620, Donne returned to London, and in 1621 he was appointed Dean of St. Paul's, a position he held until his death. The strength and eloquence of John's sermons soon gained him a reputation as the foremost preacher in England of his time. He became a favorite of both King James I and Charles I. In 1623, John became severely ill with typhus. During his illness, he reflected on the similitudes between his physical and spiritual disease, reflections that culminated in the prose Devotions upon Imagined Occasions, published in 1624. He became vicar of St. Dunstan's in the West in the same year James I died, and John preached his first sermon for Charles I. In 1630, John would almost certainly have become a bishop, but for his ailing health. He had mouth sores and had lost significant weight. Obsessed with the idea of death, John posed in a shroud a few weeks before his death. The painting was finished and later used to create an effigy. John Donne, who was critically ill with stomach cancer, left his sickbed on February 25, 1631 to deliver a final sermon at court. This was posthumously published as Death's Duel and is also called his own funeral sermon. On March 31, 1961, the literary giant passed on in London. The last thing Donne wrote just before his death was Hymn to God, My God in My Sickness. Donne's monument in his shroud survived London's Great Fire and can still be seen at St. Paul's today. Donne is immortalized as a priest in the Church of England calendar and in the calendar of saints of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America on March 31. Thank you very much for watching our videos. We'll appreciate if you subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. We love you.